Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Hasura Data and API show. I have two of my cohort here, Jesse and Gavin. They're going to talk to you about the new Super application. And we also had a question. Gavin, Jesse, do y'all want to give a go at that question? I think I know the answer, but y'all might have additional information about that question.
I am trying to locate the question.
It's one about subscription. So if you have the exact same subscription being run by multiple clients. Yeah, so there's a little bit of complexity there. And the issue is whether or not the two clients subscribing to the subscription have different stateful information. So for example, if you're injecting something like a user ID, the problem is that you can't batch the same data to both clients because they have different sessions. And so what would happen in that case is that there would be two independent subscriptions so that each sort of stateful session is getting pushed only to the client that it belongs to. But in the event that they, it's just like a very generic query and they're kind of just like, give me the first 100 posts or whatever you have, then typically, yeah, you're able to just batch those all in the same transaction that gets pushed out on the server side from Hasura.
Cool. I knew Gavin would have an answer for that. And of course, even though you mentioned no caching, if the database is back there and it's the same function that's running, it's gonna cache.
Yeah,
too.
Yeah. It's really a matter of like if you have like a Hasura user ID or like an Hasura org ID. So even if it's the same underlying query, if you have stateful information, then you really have to look at it as being like different queries per like user, just because of the nature of that kind of stateful data. But yeah.
Cool. So on that note, with questions already answered, we'll dive into the Super app. I'll leave it to you guys.
That is hitting the ground running.
That.
My goodness. Cool. So I don't think we actually introed ourselves, did we, Gavin?
We did not.
We did not. So let's do that real quick. I'll head it up. My name is Jesse Martin. I am doing technical product marketing here at Hasura, specifically focusing on Hasura Cloud. I am currently traveling, aka that's why I have like a dollhouse in my background. So enjoy that. If I bore you, at least that thing's pretty interesting. But anyways, Gavin, what are you? Who are you? What do you do?
Yeah, so my title is technical evangelist and community engineer at Hasura. Mostly I just do a kind of a mishmash of like code and like community content stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, so basically how this is going to work today, I will be asking the dumb questions and Gavin will be giving the smart answers, which has been basically our relationship so far at Hasura. So we're going to go ahead and kick this off. I'm going to be kind of doing this interview style. We built this app together. It's called the Hasura Super App. That was the final name. The name that was code worded internally was Hasura's On, which I thought was a lot nicer personally because I came up with it. But it was basically like this Amazon-esque. It's an e-commerce app. And it was designed to be like, how do you handle multi-brand? How do you handle large categories? How do you handle large volume data sets? Everything between both the consumer-facing application, right? So you have what you would expect to shop on, as well as then an admin dashboard in the backside. So something where you would be, what do we need to manage, new orders, and how do we reject those orders? So it's actually full-fledged. It's not just a e-commerce app. It's got both halves to it. And we were able to see sort of real-time statistics, leveraging some of Hasura's GraphQL subscriptions that you get out of the box. So pretty full-fledged application. And was also like my trial by fire onboarding into Hasura as well. I had some familiarity, but not to the extent that was needed for this application. So I'll kind of be asking some of the questions that I had come across. I do like Hasura Palooza. That is just amazing there in the chats. So that might have to be the next app we do, is a music festival application. That sounds pretty good. But yeah, so let's kind of dive into it. Gavin, do you want to share your screen? We'll pull up let's say the actual website, which is sort of the landing page for any resources that are coming out around this. I assume even this recording, well, this will be recorded, so if this actual show may have a link on there, but anything we produce around that space will show up there. We can go ahead and drop the link in chat as well for those that would like it, but it's pretty simple. It's just Hasura / reference app, which is also not called Super App. So, you know.
We have three names. We have the repo at Hasura e-commerce. We have the reference app link, and then we have the final title, which was Super App. So there was a little bit of debate around like how to pitch this, which maybe you'll see kind of why it was a difficult thing to brand when we get more into it. But
I mean, it's one of the three hardest things out there, right? It's naming things. So
right.
What was not hard was actually getting Hasura up and running for this application. There's your cheesy pitch number one for today's show. But we're going to be kind of talking through what we did. So I'm gonna kind of say, let's start with looking at the code structure to familiarize ourselves with what are the parts of this actual application. Do we have a running demo already up, or should we just get a demo up and running from this guy?
We do. So we have the full stack running here, kind of all of the pieces. And yeah, maybe we can just kind of like high level architecture it, and then maybe we could talk about like how they fit together, something along those lines.
That sounds great. Person behind the curtain, could we full screen that app for just a minute so we can kind of see this? Yeah, perfect. Let's go ahead and kind of just show this application off a little bit. Do you want to do a little talking walkthrough what this application does, or the parts of the UI here, so we can map it to our understanding?
Yeah, one, like super quick, I just want to go through this high level overview so we have like a little bit of context, but essentially the way this application works is that the front end that you just saw, that's Next.js, so we've got React and TypeScript. There's an Apollo client that'll be talking to Hasura. Hasura obviously can hook into Postgres, though you can use other databases. And the way that we integrate the custom business logic here is through actions. So we use Next.js Pages API, and that handles our user authentication, both for regular users and admin users. And then the other thing is that we have MinIO, which is a self-hosted S3 compatible storage. So it's like having your own like AWS S3 bucket service. And then payments are processed through Stripe's API and payment intents, which is again kind of all going through this. But with that being said, we can kind of walk through what this app is. So we really wanted to build an application that was realistic, not like a to-do app or a blog app, but like something more genuine. And so this application has two pieces. The part we're looking at right now is the like customer-facing part. And so you have these categories. So we're in home furnishing. You can do things like filter by brands, price range, all this stuff. When you click on an item, that'll take you here. You'll see all this information that's been populated. There'll be reviews here, but we don't have any reviews. We can purchase something really quick and then write a review. But let's say we want to buy these curtains. Then what we can say is like, okay, I want 2 of them. We'll check our cart. Our cart is currently empty. Let's add 2 of these to our cart. Now we can see that we have them in our cart. We say that we want to check out. That brings us to our checkout page. And then here, we just use the trusty fake number. So 1025, 123, 11111.
This is Gavin's actual credit card, just for those.
Yeah, it is. It is. Got 4111. I'm going to pull this over to the side, just kind of so we can look at network requests here. And if I send this, hopefully everything doesn't break. You can basically see that there's a GraphQL request that's being made. And then also after that, a kind of waterfall to stripe.com. So if we look in here, that's just inserted our order, which won't get validated until the webhook is made. but you can kind of see all of that stuff here. And then it's telling us that we have successfully placed a Stripe order. So look at here. And then here is our Stripe information. And yeah, so it actually processes payments, does all of that good stuff. Of course, this is with a fake card. Now, the other part of this is like user sign up and orders. So if I go to my account, then you'll be able to see that here we have our user and username. We can update our password, and we have these addresses that we can add, which this here is for debugging. But when we went to check out, you saw that it auto-filled our primary address. Again, pretty useful, something that you probably have in a regular app. Sign up and stuff works as well. So if I open this in a new tab, and I go into sign up, and then I say username will be user2, email user2@site.com with a password, repeat it, password. Let's check to make sure that didn't, okay. I'll open the network tab again, clear this, and we will go sign up. So then you'll see that this GraphQL request was made where it's signing in here, and the response that we get back is a refresh token, which we can use to refresh our JWT, and then the actual JWT itself. So if we take this JWT token and we put this into jwt.io, then let's put it here. You can see the payload here is sort of following the Hasura spec. So we are a user as our default role. We're only allowed to be a user, and our user ID is 503. So that's kind of how that works. And then now that we've signed in, that information is kind of stuck in an Apollo store and in local state. And yeah, that's kind of a rough overview about how the front end journey works. A couple of cool things here, which like you may or may not care about. If we check out something like these pillows, these are all reactive. So you can kind of click on these and it'll show you different things. There's more like this. And you can see that there's a review here for best cushions ever. If we pop back over here, and I go back into home furnishing as this user, then I should now be able to write a review here. So if I write a review and I'm just like, you know, these were terrible curtains, fell apart immediately, and I submit this review, let's go ahead and clear this. Oh, that has broken apparently. But yeah, when it doesn't break, you can submit a review. And one of the cool things about that is that if we look at the permissions for the way that product reviews are allowed to be submitted, Hasura has this really flexible authorization mechanism. And so what we said here is basically that anybody who's a user they're allowed to insert rows, but only when let's look at one that probably has it formatted same as insert and delete. So basically they can only insert here. So they can only insert when the user ID is equal to the Hasura user ID. And so basically what this allows you to do is to say that inside of the products, if a user hasn't ordered a product, they're not able to leave a review, which is pretty cool. And then the other side of this app, which we'll show, so let's get rid of this over here, is if I again log in, so I come in here and I go to here, there is a /admin/account login. And if I, my account, okay. For some reason, it does not want to let me log in. I don't know why it's redirecting like that. But essentially, I'll pull it up here on the repo. There's a back-end part to this, which is that you kind of log in here as an admin in the same process, and then it gives you access to this whole admin dashboard, which has things like a sales summary, a list of frequent recent orders and products, a list of new customers, and this is kind of a management dashboard where you can manage your product inventory if you weren't doing it from Hasura. So yeah, that's kind of the rough architectural overview of how the app works. And yeah, I guess we could then maybe talk about like code-wise how this is set up. So do we have any questions so far before we go on?
So we have you may have gone over this before. Is it possible to sort by color pattern with those pillows you're saying? I'm guessing yes, like, on the product, it would just be a matter of which attributes you're storing for the product, right? So if you're storing that data for the product, then you could definitely add that as a queryable feature. It's not going to inherently know which attributes are in the photo per se. So it just has to have that data stored.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. We can basically kind of go over, I'll do it here in the other tab. So the way that these products are set up is that they sort of have these attributes. So they're set up with a name, a description, a brand, a price, and then image URLs, and as well as a category. And so if you were going to do things like add specific attributes, like let's say you wanted to add color for things that are on curtains, there's two ways that you could do it. One is that you could modify it so that it has a JSON-B column. So I'm just going to go ahead and do it. So if I say, custom attributes is a type JSON-B, and that can be nullable. And I'll save that. And so now we have this JSON-B column. One super useful note about JSON-B is that it can also be used to store arrays. So if you want something like this, if you just want like 1, 2, 3, 4, and these might be IDs or strings, you can use JSON-B for this as well, because arrays are considered valid JSON. So this can be kind of a lazy way to model relational data. Not that I recommend it, but let's say where the name, let's see, is similar. Or it should actually be I like case insensitive, and then we'll do like curtain, and I run that. Okay, so we have a bunch of curtains, and we'll just take these, and if we edit this, then now you see that we have this custom attributes that's JSON-B. And what we can do is we can say that we want to edit custom attributes, and we could be like color is purple, and save that. Okay, so that's been saved. And then now what we can do is go from the API here. So if we go ahead and query, and we query products, and we say where the custom attributes contains, and then I think this expression is, I haven't used these in a while, but I think this expression is color, maybe, or that would be has keys. It's either like you can directly put it there. I could put name, description, and then custom attributes. We'll do has key then. And then now that you can see that we can sort of filter through these JSON-B attributes, kind of like they were a JSON document. And I want to say that the way that contains works, so here we have custom attribute color purple. I want to say that contains, we can do color, because I think these need to be escaped in the quotes. But anyways, the point is that you can basically have custom attributes and you can sort of filter through them. The only problem is that with things like curtains versus like baby toys, color, and a lot of these attributes, they won't be persistent. They won't be applicable to everything. And so you would typically just want to have like a catch-all custom attributes for doing that. But yeah, that's pretty much how you could do that if you wanted.
Another way to go about it is this kind of data would typically be stored in something like a proper PIM. So you would have essentially your product inventory or whatever else tracked inside of Hasura. And then your PIM would be tracking all the individual product attributes that you're wanting to associate with. When you use something in Hasura, you could also make that be a remote schema join, where you'd be able to join that ID onto whatever your external PIM source is, and be able to filter that way as well. So you could say, you know, this product is prototypical for curtains, and then when you drill down on curtain properties, you could say you can actually filter on that as well. So you can filter on a remote schema that you have attached to Hasura.
Yeah, and basically, I think what Jesse is saying is that remote schema is probably something like this, where you have like you're saying that you have a product, and then you can give an arbitrary attribute. So this would be like color and then value. So if we did this and we put product ID to ID on product, and then we save it. Add table, a primary key is required. We'll just put that, add table. And then we go into relationships. Now we can add a product attribute onto products. So we can make the relationship here, go to product, do the inverse of the relationship, which it'll suggest it. So here we add product attributes. And then essentially what you can do is, again, we can find something where the name has, I like case insensitive curtain. And so we'll grab this one, 308. And you can see the product attributes is empty. And then what we'll do is basically go here and we'll insert into product attribute a row where the product ID is 308, the attribute is color, and the value is purple. Save that, then come back here. Refresh it, run query 308. And then now if we look at product attributes here, then now you can see that this curtain, which is aqua, probably not, that's probably not a purple, but that curtain now has an attribute color of value purple. And then you could query that kind of like this. So basically say product, and then on product, you could say where, product attributes, attribute equals color, and the value equals purple. Try that. So not this.
While he's getting the query set up here, this just goes to speak again that with tools like Hasura or tools like, you know, GraphQL even as a specification, there's so much flexibility available that you really want to make sure you've front-loaded your architecture in terms of thinking and planning, because there's a lot of ways to solve the same problem, and that can really slow you down the road if you're moving so quickly that you build in some kind of a latency into the issue, the model. You don't want to get yourself in that situation. So front loading your architecture ahead of time will really, really, really help you in the long run.
Yeah, but now we have like an actual solid relational data model. So you can say, we want products where the color is purple, and then we get this array here. And that will be a much more performant and scalable approach versus using JSONB. JSONB is just kind of the lazy, or for things you can't know ahead of time. Like if you have, if you allow users to configure things with arbitrary properties, then you wouldn't know what these keys were to set them in the columns. But that's what JSONB is for. So there's, there's a lot of ways that you could configure this. But yeah, I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, I mean, live modeling and solving the problem in the actual project is always helpful. I want to return to one of the questions previously. First of all, somebody is admiring your Windows 11 setup, so very sleek design there. But the question from Marcos, are you storing the Stripe transactions in Hasura or requesting directly to the Stripe API? So the authentication purchasing, if I remember correctly, we're doing this through an action that goes straight to the Hasura API or the Stripe API, and then we're storing the order itself inside of Hasura. This is correct, right?
Yeah, so basically the way that it works is that the pages API, these are organized. So by actions are Hasura actions, and webhooks are Hasura webhooks. But under actions, there's a create payment intent, which don't do what this says. There's a giant note as to why, but for the sake of this demo, it works. But anyways, the payment intent gets created here, and that's returned to the client. When the client purchases, it's kind of a two-step process. So inside of the React component, the order is created when they initiate the payment, just so that it's in the system, but it's not confirmed. The Stripe status is synced to the order. So if you look here and we look at order status, we have this enum here. And we kind of sync these along. And then the way that an order is moved along is like, okay, the order has been initially created, but in between the time that the payment card is processed and Stripe says, hey, we've received the money, it's like a 1 second span where it's like create an order, but the order is created. And then immediately after the payment goes through, that hits a webhook, which you can see here. And this webhook will find the order in the DB by querying with Hasura, and then it'll update the payment status. So I hope that makes sense, but it's kind of like a weird two-step process.
But it's an event-driven architecture. So basically, instead of having to have one massive long asynchronous process, you're able to send out an event to an external system and then react to that to a response from that later on without having to block any I/O or be making the user wait for a super long running process to go through.
Right. Yeah. The other reason,
for those not familiar with the Next.js, you're good.
Just really quick, the only reason why it works like that is because in the event that somebody files an order and the payment fails and doesn't go through, it's better to have the order captured in your system so that you can like follow up, or at least have it for accounting purposes that they tried to purchase it. At least I think so.
Yeah, because then you can later on reach out to them, contact them, see if there's even like a unifying metric a bit behind all of our orders out of, Washington, D.C. are failing because somehow the Washington, D.C. was truncating, or, who knows what. So it's always good to capture that kind of data. Capturing custom user input to your product is always worth capturing, whether it was a failed interaction or not. So it's kind of a general principle to follow.
Yeah.
If you go back to the code that I just wanted to call out, maybe that was a little bit strange to see. If you're not familiar with the Next.js framework, it allows you to put both your UI pages and your API route handlers in the same directory. It's it's fun. It's great. It's a helpful utility that may have just been confusing to somebody to see this like drop down API route next to all their other pages. It's a little bit of a mind trip at first. It's super helpful as a developer, but it's just you have your pages for your interface, and then you have your API routes in the same directory, which is cool. But yeah, in case that was confusing to somebody, that's everything /API is server side. Everything not /API is front end.
Yeah. Maybe the one thing that could be interesting here is we get a lot of questions about like how to handle auth or JWT. So a lot of people use like Firebase or Auth0. If you're interested in kind of just seeing like how a very, very basic roll out your own JWT auth works, we have a sign up and login handler here, which is very slim. And so basically the way that it works is that when a user signs up, this is an action hooked up to Hasura, which I'll show in a second. But the basic REST API sort of just takes the email, the password, and the name. And then what happens is the password gets encrypted with bcrypt. So you store the password in your database encrypted. And then what happens is that a JWT is generated, and there's a spec for Hasura, but really all you need is a default role and allowed roles, and then you can put other claims in here if you want. Typically, you always want like a user ID so that you can use that in your permissions, but you could put any value in here, and here we're just putting the user's ID. This is also setting a cookie. Jesse, he set all that up. He's also the reason why cookie auth works properly in Hasura now. And then, yeah, it just spits back JSON or handles the problem. Then to log in, it's really similar. You grab the email and the password, and you query Hasura, and you say, is there a user where the email is equal to this email? And then you grab their encrypted hashed password. And what you do is you, to check if it's valid, you compare the plain text password that they've sent in the login form against the hash password in the database. If it isn't valid, you say, no, you can't log in. Otherwise, you just do the exact same thing. Sign the JWT, and then just return that JWT. And I think both of these are less than 100 lines of code. So it's maybe 150 lines of JavaScript to write your own working JWT auth for Hasura. And if you're interested in doing that, this might be a helpful example.
So Philip from chat is commenting that typically when you're integrating with an external service, whether it be Firebase, Auth, or Auth0, that you're having to typically be manipulating your product or manipulating Hasura from the Auth0 side. So the Auth0 hook that I'm familiar with, you would sign up for Auth0, and then from Auth0 you fire a hook over to your database and say, okay, insert through the Hasura API, insert this user into my user's database. And then you're using Auth0 as the authentication layer, and it's checking that for you. And he's saying that it's a pain in the neck to do in development because maybe you have just Hasura running on localhost. And the simple answer is that, yes, it's a pain. So rolling your own auth, which is always suspect, like what we've done here, this just shows a master example of how you could actually, or a primary example of how you could do it yourself. That is definitely showing a great example of how to do it without using an external service. When you're doing it from an external tool, I mean, Auth0's done their best to try to make that straightforward with allowing local hosts and things like that, but it is just painful. We have a lot of references on how to do that, and we have one of our highest visited pieces of content is actually the Auth0 Hasura tutorial, which walks through step by step. But as far as I know, Gavin, there is not actually a more better way to do that.
Yeah, so we they're in a little bit of a odd place in our docs. So basically, so here's an example with auth zeros, but all the way at the bottom of this JWT page, so it's under the core docs auth and auth z, and then you see here using JWT. So there's some sample apps that show how you can do JWT auth. And so we have an auth0 example, we have a Firebase example, but one of the other cool ones that we have is a custom do-it-your-own auth with Hasura Actions, which is exactly what you're seeing here. And this one is using Python and Flask. And so this walks you through step-by-step, like, okay, we're going to create these action types, which we also haven't shown in this yet, but we can look at like how is this Next.js pages API route, how is that plugged into Hasura? But this walks you through setting up pretty much the exact same thing that we have here, and then it walks you through how to do it in Python. And the cool thing about this is that if you look at the finished code, I'm going to zoom out a little bit. It's just this. So the complete app code for a JWT self-hosted auth server is all right here in a single file. So this is a really easy way to just be like, I kind of want to understand how this works. Python is, I think, easy to read. So you can just look at this and be like, oh, okay, generate token. This is how this works. But yeah, maybe something to check out if you're interested in that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
See, at this point, they're just assuming that the topic, us describing this as the super app, was just marketing buzzwordy. But we've got roll your own auth, we've got admin dashboards, we've got Stripe payments. So, I mean, it is a functioning e-commerce application from A to Z. Obviously, a few pieces you'd want to adapt to your specific use case, or you'd need to harden according to your specific use cases, where maybe it's not the best practice to just run the dollar value from the server, from the client.
Yeah.
But again, heavily documented in those cases where readability took precedence over correctness in that case. So definitely see those comments. Do a word search in the code base for "do not," and you'll find it. So, like, again, readability is critical in applications like this. If you're not familiar with why you don't want to do that, you probably shouldn't be rolling your own auth and running your own payment server, anyways. So we'll just put that out there.
At least in these scenarios, like, we've tried to give descriptions of like what should be done and like why this isn't good. The other point is that about like last thing on the auth is that rolling your own JWT auth is great. And even adding like SMS messages for one-time PIN or like email links is not that hard. You can do it in less than 200 lines. But when you start getting into if you have sort of security compliance restrictions, or you need to integrate with a lot of things like SSO or SAML, then it can make sense, especially just to kind of use like an auth provider that's already taking care of that. But if you're making a small app, you're a small startup, then you can, personally, I think you can roll a lot of this yourself and save yourself like a good amount of money. But yeah.
Yeah. And speaking of saving yourself a lot of money, no, I'm not actually making a Hasura Cloud pitch. One of the other whole sections of the reference app is the MinIO integration, which is a S3 compatible API self-hosted storage bucket. And so from the admin dashboard, there's actually a way to upload new products to the Hasura system. Is that working yet, or are we still getting that redirect bug for getting into admin?
I think we're getting the redirect bug, but let me check something really quick and see if this one will load, because
One thing that Hasura does not provide is built-in file storage for a number of reasons, but because usually people will bring their own storage because you're bringing your own database in most cases. So people usually have their own storage also pre-configured. You can integrate very easily or simply, but with the storage bucket, this is really a powerful area to really show how you could get around a massive, complicated storage option from one of the other vendors. Again, if you're bringing your own from somewhere else, that's all great and not a problem. But being able to say, okay, I want to actually have my own storage sitting alongside this push button deploy with Docker, this reference piece alone inside of the application is well worth having a look at. And I would suggest definitely going through the code if you're into or looking into uploading the storage via the Hasura actions or something else, which is all handled inside of this reference app as well. We could even just look at the actual action that handles that upload just so we can kind of see the walkthrough. I'm not sure what's causing the redirect. There's some kind of a failure for the login.
But, yeah. Let me just check one last time if this is still super broken.
Somebody commented earlier that if there isn't something broken in your demo is suspect, which I really appreciate.
Right. So now
we're in.
Yeah, it magically works. I just cleared a bunch of like cache and like local storage stuff. So
yeah, that happens.
Yeah, this is. I was actually really excited to show this. So I was a bit bummed when the demo gods pulled the usual. But so something super cool is that unlike a lot of sort of generic e-commerce starter apps, which are just kind of like a one-page thing that have like categories and then use like a pre-made checkout button, this has the whole front end. It has the accounts. But on the back end, it also has like a somewhat realistic admin dashboard. And so if you're a merchant, you can come here and you can see your sales summary. So you can see the sales here, the orders to customers. You see recent orders here, and then recent customers. And so let's see, we view products here. And yeah, this is kind of the same filterable thing about products. Go to another one with customers. You can click a customer, and if this isn't broken, view their orders. Okay, maybe that one doesn't work. But if we view the products, then you can actually click on an order and look at all the products that are specific to that order, which is super cool. That's something that you would want in an actual app. But the other thing that we can do, and this is where MinIO comes in, is if we go to add product, and we just say like new product, and then like some description, and then if I go to pictures, we have a benchmark for SQL Server, which that is fine, and then we'll say that this is like $999. So if I open this, and I'm going to clear this console and also clear the network requests. One thing I want to show you really quick is that basically here in MinIO, which is that self-hosted S3, there's nothing. So we don't have any buckets. If you're familiar with S3, we don't have any objects. And so what's going to happen when we click this save product is that's going to call this, it's going to call this image upload as part of the handler. And this is, I think, one of the cool parts because this is a demonstration of having an S3 configuration for a bucket that also handles resizing. So it's going to create a bunch of automatically resized images from the original and host them on the bucket. And the other cool thing that it does is it will see if this bucket exists on AWS S3 or MinIO, whatever S3 compatible. And if the bucket doesn't exist the first time, it will just create it for you. And it does that as kind of a bootstrap, startup phase. So let's see how our luck is. We will click save product. And what do we get? Console. No. Oh, that's the wrong save product button. They're both called save products. Okay, sweet. So now we have data being inserted. You can see it here. So it calls out to image upload. And then you can see our uploaded data here. So the thumb, the small, the original, and kind of metadata. And then also GraphQL, we've inserted product 1, which means that if I go back here, I go to my MinIO browser, I reload it. Now all of a sudden we have this bucket called site images. That was bootstrapped for us and created automatically because it doesn't existed. And then now we have the original large, small, medium thumb, the image sizes. And there's a way for you to look at these, which I think is download object. We basically have to do that. And then
rename that to JPEG or something.
yeah, I think that it has to be renamed to JPEG, or there's a shareable link. There you go. So you go to the shareable link from our MinIO bucket, and it'll give you this signed S3. So you can see like X, AMZ signed headers, and then now we can see that that we just uploaded, and all of this is open source. So it's completely self-hosted. There's no products you have to sign up for, no accounts you need. Literally just run Docker Compose up and it starts the whole stack. And then now if we look here at new product, that's been created. The image is failed to be pulling. But yeah, so it's pretty cool.
I think we have a you may have hard coded the image URL there to a different demo somewhere, but
Okay.
yeah, I mean that's just such a powerful feature there to be including. So it's like this is an absolute monster app here. I'm calling it what was it we called it again? The Super App. So calling it a Super App was definitely fair because it's got all the pieces that you would need to really be able to even cut something out and be able to use. You'll have noticed as well that in all those cases, there was always a GraphQL request, always requesting back to the Hasura API. What we have is, maybe we can rebuild that in Vue. But what is fair, or what is interesting, is that all these different APIs, the payment APIs that go off to Stripe, the storage APIs that go off to MinIO, all of those that are mapped to actions inside of the Hasura API, and so you're still distributing one single GraphQL API for all of these different actions and functions and behaviors, and that becomes so. And you can protect all those actions with the same access controls that we saw at the beginning. So you can say only my admins have access to this upload API. I don't have to put an access control in front of MinIO. I don't have to put an access control in front of Stripe. I can simply just use essentially service level integrations in my backend in the action handler, and then I can just use all of my user management and role management from inside of Hasura, which becomes just a great way to be able to work with the content. So that's a really great pattern that we want to see people integrate more and more, is that Hasura does so much. It's your data access layer and your data control layer. So it's like the access and permissions, as well as then the instant API and the ability to put these actions on there, or even reaching out to external schemas like your PIM or whatever else, and being able to control all of that from the Hasura interface. So it's one API, one entry point, one output point. It's just really a very powerful primitive to work with.
Yeah. Now that Jesse says that, I do realize I forgot entirely to show this part, which is super critical. So the question is like, okay, we have all these, Next.js or Express or Ruby, whatever, REST API endpoints, but how do we pull those into Hasura so we can reuse everything? You basically just, you need to wrap the input type. So for admin login, it takes an email and a password, and the JSON that it returns has these fields. And so you just define the input and output types for your REST API endpoint, and you tell it where that REST API endpoint lives, which here is our Next.js server URL from the environment /API/action/admin login. And then you come in here, you go to permissions, and I've just turned anonymous on for testing, but you could see that we can say that only admin is able to query this, which means that you don't need to re-implement auth checks on the services that are gated behind Hasura. So if you have, 3 or 4 microservices, instead of needing to either use a separate API gateway for auth or re-implement validation and auth and role checking on each service, you just say, hey, only Hasura can talk to these microservices, so you know the traffic is safe and has been validated, and Hasura will tell you, this is the role of the person that's requesting it, and you can just read the role out of the request. And then one final thing that we have here on the actions, you can make relationships, which lets you join it back to your data as if it were like foreign keys, which is really powerful because you can connect different APIs and join across them as if they were like relational data. And then we also have these code gens. So if you're just starting and you're like, I know I want a login endpoint and I know I want it to take these fields and return this, you can use the code gen that we have. And let's say you want to write it in Python and Flask. It will write the types for you in the language, and it will give you the outline of the endpoint. So, TypeScript site, and you basically just fill in the blanks, and it'll give you all of the types. And we have a bunch of languages there, Spring Boot, Ruby, all sorts of stuff. So, yeah.
Speaking of code gen, and we are not going to go into that, but speaking of code gen, one of the patterns implemented in this project as well was what we referred to as TypeScript generated tooling. We just did a 3-hour workshop, and when I say we, I read the comments and Gavin did the coding, like we've done today as well. But so we have a workshop that we'll drop a link for as well. But basically, there's a tool out there called GraphQL Zeus that allows you to be able to take that schema from Hasura and be able to generate a bunch of hooks and type helpers. One of the things that was funny to me when I started working on this project is I would do the typical pattern of I would fetch content. This is a React-based product. I would take the fetch to the server, and then I would dump it into local state, and then I would manipulate it locally that way and have sort of a synchronized mechanism. And Gavin was doing a funny, review of my code initially. He's like, yeah, that's really a great pattern. With Hasura, we don't have to do that. With GraphQL and Hasura, we don't have to do that. So he just deleted 50 lines of my code and just went straight to the database, because that's what Hasura is there for, is it gives you that API directly on the DB. And does all the protection and synchronization for you. So the generated tooling then gives you this Apollo-like hook interface where you say, use typed query like he's showing here, and you're able to compose these super powerful queries in a hook format and be able to just iterate that content. This is mind-blowing stuff. That pattern alone is well worth having a look at. I would recommend watching the workshop for that, because we do not have time. We've got 2 minutes left, so this is also your final call for questions here. But this would be really a fantastic pattern to look at. It's a real mind warp, brain explode emoji moment. I would definitely recommend having a look at that. I'm sure to leave it there because it's so deep. We could definitely shoot off on another hour or 3 on that topic. So we're gonna do our final call of questions here because we're wrapping up close to the hour. One comment here from Marco. So a question on logs. We didn't do logs on this project with Docker setup. From internally in the company and me on the technical marketing side for Hasura Cloud, I would highly recommend looking at the Hasura Cloud offerings there because it has all the logs, all the observability built in, plus a bunch of hardening features as well, where you could say, these are my final form API requests from what my product is calling for, making an allow list for those, or setting up even additional control checks. So logs, definitely an important topic. We didn't cover that in this specific app because our ideal flow is for you to have a look at the Hasura Cloud there, where logs are just handled and are super powerful. Did did you want to show something here on log? So you can see, we have this operations tab here that would show up everything that's coming in. Is this one actually connected to the demo app?
No, and this one actually isn't the best one, but one of these two has multiple data sources, I think, and remote schemas. So if I go to the monitoring tab, then it will show, so like here you can see that the GraphQL engine has this default healthy database, and then there's also 2 actions. These are just test instances, so unfortunately they don't have a lot of data, but you can see that there's metrics here. You can view if you have multiple databases and like remote schemas and actions, it'll show you here, and you can kind of look at what all those things are, which is really cool. It'll show you your error rate. You can look at operations, which you can inspect for basically a whole lot of information. This one is invalid, but yeah, it just shows you a lot of really comprehensive debugging stuff. You also get access to a GraphQL API with all this information, and then you can set up rate limiting and regression testing and stuff like that as well. So if any of that sounds interesting, like Jesse said, definitely maybe look at our cloud stuff.
Yeah, so we're going to have to wrap it right there. We're over the hour by just a little bit. Again, Super App is called that for a reason, or whatever you want to call it. It's got a lot of great patterns in there to have a look at. If there's more of it you want to see, definitely feel free to reach out and let us know. We can definitely come back on, talk about more pieces of it, watch that workshop. I'm going to hand this back over now to the other ball on stage, who will play us out.
I don't even have that much to say, except everybody, thanks for joining us today, and we will catch you next time. Cheers.